recording back on. Okay, so oh, thank you, Sandra. That's very kind of you. You're a lifer for me here. There's a couple of you that always come. This is Unpacking the New Math Curriculum. We're doing grade 6 number fractions. And some of the sessions I do, I put 4 to 6 because the progression is very logical, and I can mostly do it in an hour and 15 minutes. I do have a tendency to overplan, talk very quickly, and sometimes, you don't have time to digest everything. So when you get the slides, hopefully that will help. For those of you who did come to the 4 and 5, I still have to send you those. So the 4 and 5 are coming. I've just got to make a few notes. And I'm actually, for those of you who, like Isabel, Audrey, there's a few of you who have maybe not been to the 4 or the 5 because that's not the grade you teach. I'm going to send you the slides for all 3 grades because fractions is so heavy in the new curriculum, and because your students, in particular grade 6, have not had the new learnings, the learnings from the prior learnings from the new program of studies or the new curriculum. It is critical that you go back. And I'm even going to show you going back to grade 1, actually. So I do have some slides from grade 5 that I was going to include. I'm just going to show you some samples, but I think I've decided that I'm going to send the 4 and the 5. There will be repetitive slides within each one of them, but anything that's new to grade 5, like adding fractions, and then grade 6, adding with unlike denominators, those will be new slides each time. But I think it will be good for you to even repeat those slides to see all of the prior knowledge that these students are going to have to work up to, and you as well. And that is, again, before I get into everything else, it always is important. I think I might still have a slide. I tried to reduce my slides today. That these sessions, the main purpose is to help you understand those statements, those learning outcomes, and the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedure statements. What do they mean? When you read them, do you get an understanding of what that particular statement, in light of all bringing it together, the knowledge and understanding together, in light of reflecting off that learning outcome, do you understand it? Because once you understand it and get it internalized in your brain, I will say, in your mind, then it'll be easier to understand and work with the students. So the intention is mainly for you, but there are some strategies. And then I'm going to tell you about the second session, part 2, at the end, where it will go more into looking at particular manipulatives that will help you with the students. So that's what we're looking at. I'll just do the land acknowledgement. Oh, I've got some. I'll just look at this first. Oh, okay, that's great. Great. Oh, and Maria, so good to see you. Another person who comes all the time. In the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge that this gathering is taking place on traditional treaty lands across the province of Alberta, home to many diverse Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples. So I always do this, have a little warm up. So today we have a little bit of time to look at this. So this is like a math talk, a number talk. I try as much as possible to make it relate to, or to have it relate to what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the time. And so it's just to get you thinking. It works really good face-to-face. If you don't use it, if we don't, we'll look at it now. If we don't have time, a lot of time to discuss it, it's just a good idea for you to use with your students. I like to start my sessions with that whenever I can, and I would encourage highly for you to do that with your students. So this is Splat, and this is Steve Wyborny, who does Which One Doesn't Belong, but this one in Splat is a little bit different because it deals with fractions. So I'm just going to walk through it. You don't have to answer in the chat room or anything, just think to yourself. So first thing, I'm just going to show you, what if whether I call this quantity, and you can see that sometimes we struggle. I'm very conscious now of what words I use. So how many do I have? How much do I have? What is the quantity? I tend now to say everything I can. I am volunteering right now with junior highs. And so very, very conscious of my vocabulary with these particular grade 8 and 9 students, and going back to vocabulary that's used in elementary. And sometimes I find I may have to say it in more than one way to make sure that all students understand. So I'm just looking at what do we have here. And you can just kind of figure it out. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 wholes and 4 1/2 of a whole. And so we can say 4, 5, and 6. And what you get here is in 6. And then if you know what splat is all about, what's going to happen is that then I'm going to say splat. And now the question is, what's under that blob, that splat or that black blob there? And so the idea is that you see that you've got 2 wholes and a half. And we can, as adults, it's not hard for us to figure out that we've got 2 and 1/2. And what would we have there would be, I'm going to say 3 and 1/2 under the splats. Now, I have to tell you though, that when you do this, if you decide to do this with students, and this is just a warm up, it's just to get the students, it's working with easy fractions. But what you're going to get, having done this with students, some students will think that they have to tell you exactly what is under there. So, and the next one is it shows. So some of the students, and I never thought of that the first time, with fractions in particular, that they had to say that there were 3 1/2s and 2 wholes. That's right. But they weren't sure. Did you want 2, 3 1/2 or 1/2, or did you want 3 halves and 2 wholes? So you'll just remember that if you do that with your students, you'll have to make sure that they understand. Either way is fine. Or you could ask them if you wanted it in one particular way. And now we're going to give the number. So we're going to show. So we want 6. There are 6 in total, a quantity, a number of 6. And on outside the splat, we've got 1 whole and we've got 2 1/4 or 2 quarters, if we, depending, and we'll talk about vocabulary. And so now the idea is what is under that blob or that splat, so that we have now something that's equal to 6. And before I do this, I will tell you that even though you're going to see the answer in a particular way, what was great about this particular one that I did with students, these were junior highs, grade 8s, because we were going to move on to do some work with fractions. They can tell me whatever they want is under there. I wasn't interested. I needed to have, if this was 1 1/2, I needed to know that they would tell me whatever was under there was equivalent to 4 1/2, but it didn't matter to me whether it was halves or quarters or 3/4 or whatever. But this is what it's showing, quarters. And I think in Steve Wyborny's, I think it's always the same fraction, the same unit fraction, which is 1/4. But when I work with the students, depending on the level, it was an interesting conversation to see what they put on their mini whiteboards, because I use mini whiteboards all the time. So they had to just kind of draw it out for me or tell me symbolically. So there's an idea, and there's lots more, and you can just work with whole numbers if you want as well. And there's decimals. So what I'm going to share today is, and I'll apologize again because it may not kind of be in a nice flowing order, because I did make some last minute changes this afternoon. So I'm going to share the understanding of the outcome 6 and 5, which is, I've got it written twice. Students relate fractions to quotients. That's 6 and 5. Then 6 and 6, students add and subtract fractions with denominators within 100. And 6 and 7, students interpret the multiplication of natural numbers by fractions. Now you're going to see that you see here that 6 and 8 is in black. And I have decided, because this particular outcome, all of them are very important, and it's really necessary for you to have a good grasp and a good hold of what these outcomes mean and the cusps that go with them. So I have decided that I'm going to take 6 and 8, and I'm going to pull that out and make it into a separate session because we're looking at ratios and rates. The other reason I decided to do that was because when I looked at grade 4, 5, and 5s, when I did their sessions, grade 4s are doing percentages and grade 5s are looking at ratios and percents, along with as part of fractions and decimals. I didn't do like I kind of skimmed through that very quickly because of time. So I think what I'll do is a session that will deal with 4, 5, and 6. One session that deals with looking at fractions, decimals, the last outcome for each of the grades, particularly focusing on percentages, ratios, and rates. And then in grade 6, we're looking at unit rates as well, because it is heavy as well. So I'm going to leave that one out. Now, I do have the slides ready, and if someone is doing ratios and rates right now, I can send the slides to them as an extra. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm not doing them in this order. I'm going to start with addition and subtraction of fractions. So I'm going to start with 6 and 6, and then I'm going to look at 6 and 5 at the very end, just because it's a little bit wordy and we want to talk about the meaning. These are the sites. So these are the sites for fractions. They might be the sites for other things as well. There's some professional learning in here. I want you to pay close attention to these student action verbs because this is a new link. We just received this link, I think, for the last session I did. So, and I'll show you a slide with the student action verbs. So just make sure that if you're going to go to the site, that you look at the grade 6 fractions, just to be absolutely certain that you have the latest link to it, and it will take you to that site, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And then we have other sites, virtual sites that you can use, practice sites that you can use. Sometimes I even have Khan Academy on there because I think some of his videos, they're quite clear and very simple and nice for you to look at, to review, especially when it comes to looking at a standard algorithm or procedure. Nice to send home to parents so that they can have an understanding of what certain concepts, methods are about. And he does use visuals. It isn't just at the symbolic level. And more sites here. There's some for percentages. Okay. So these are some professional learning resources as well. I showed them to the grade 5s. This is for you. So there's the fractions on complicating fractions, everything from Mary and Small. We have some from Sherry Parrish, and this one, Rethinking Fractions, is one I often go to a lot. By Catherine Bruce. So Dr. Catherine Bruce, there are actually some resources that I'm going to show you that have actually been developed by some of the people here at the U of A, especially when it comes to the learning progressions. But these are some professional learning resources that you might want to look at. Isabel, I'm not sure if there are any in French as well. Something that I need to look for. And remember, Isabel, that you just feel free to go when you have to your other meeting. Okay, thanks. So just very quickly, this is part of the notes I put in, but I thought I would just add this today. So the next slides that you're going to see explain and illustrate the importance of understanding not only the intent of the learning outcomes and CUS, but also the math behind it. So with the new curriculum, it is important that you have a deep mathematical understanding of the components so that you can be more intuitive in supporting student learning. And I mentioned that at the beginning. If you have this, in your mind, if it's under your belt, I always say there's two things for me that are important in mine, and that's what's in my mind and what's in my heart. So I know the math behind it, whatever concept. I know different strategies around that math so that I can notice that in my students. And the hard part comes from having a good relationship with them, because if you do, then they'll take that risk. They'll ask those questions, and they will be encouraged to do that. So it also helps when you have that understanding to be better prepared to help in student misunderstandings, because you'll be able to notice those a bit more. And then I said it was for this reason that I only spend time with the learning outcomes, but although that there are teaching strategies that come with it as well. So some of the resources, these are not necessarily resources or documents that are also very helpful to you when you're doing especially grade 6 fractions. I wanted to show you this one. It's not necessarily a help, but it's just a kind of a reinforcement to show you how much has changed. So this is the comparison document on the ARPDC site. Look at what's new. And what's in yellow is what's new for fractions for grade 6. So you can see lots of yellow, lots of yellow. So that just tells you that there's lots of new learnings that are going to happen for you and for the students. The other document that's really going to be very, very helpful for you, and I mentioned that I gave you the new link to it, is the glossary for the student action verbs. And it's almost complete. So when you click on this link that you see, you're going to come to a variety of documents. And there are two types of documents that you'll see. You'll get the glossary, which is a full page, or many pages, sorry, that are all to do with the verbs from the skills and procedures. And most of you know that. So it says what skills and procedures, what grade they're found in, and then there's a definition. For some of them, for all of them, there is a definition card. So it's just something that you can print off. It's actually more kind of related to math. The ones that are in the glossary, they are more general. So order means to arrange in a sequence, predict to form a likely answer, where these cards now will relate it to math specifically, not quite the specific concept or the skill and procedure, but to math. So what does relate mean in math? And you have the link, you'll be able to access all the cards. In some of those cards, and it's the ones with the asterisks, but you'll see which ones they are, it goes even deeper. So you have to scroll down a little bit, and you'll see then illustrative examples. So where do you see relate in grade 6, and in what specific skill and procedure, which outcome does it relate to? And then there you'll see the illustrative examples. So you can see on here that this is showing you equivalent fractions in here. So it's relating equivalent fractions on a number line. So that is obviously something that this would be grade 4. It would be something that's in the learning outcome and the cusps and the skills and procedures as part of that. And so you have this example, and then you have some references as well. These are going to be very, very valuable to you. Sorry,
Betty, are these illustrative examples ones that have come from previous versions of the program of studies, or is this a new set?
This is in different sets. I can't. You mean the achievement indicators?
Well, but before the achievement indicators, we had illustrative examples in the 2007 version.
Right. Oh, so yes.
Yeah.
I know which ones you mean now.
Yeah. Okay. But
you know what, Audrey? I don't think so. But I can't. I won't say no. Okay. But I don't think so. Actually, I'm just going to write that down and find out. I would say no.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. But you can have a look at them and see. Maybe there are a few. So that's good. That's one example of a good resource. Another resource that I'm giving for you, and I think because I'm trying to, this is not to help you with the outcomes. These are actually, this one is to help you with the teaching. This is on our ARPDC site. But the reason I wanted to show it to you is because oftentimes teachers, don't look at it. These have been developed by the Calgary Board of Education, and they've let us put it on the ARPDC site. So what these are tasks, and it goes by the outcome. Sometimes you'll see something that is related to a specific knowledge, understanding, or skills and procedures, but it will give you ideas. And so somebody must have sat down and gone all over the web and through resources and got permission, because these have all been vetted, and they are willing to share them with us. So these are on the ARPDC site. You just have to put Calgary Board of Education in the search in the new resources, and it'll come up. And every one of these blue links takes you to an activity or a task. Not so much, well, this one takes you to John Vanderwall's book. So obviously there's going to be a lot of learning there because he's very good at explaining things in a very simple way. So this one is fractions as indicated division. So that's maybe some personal professional learning for you. And then there's activities as well. So that's another support for you. And then this one, I haven't shown this one either, but I think I should be doing it more often. This one is just for your planning. So all of the outcomes, all of the organizing ideas, and then the learning outcomes with the understanding and the skills and procedures. The knowledge is on the back end of this card. They're all on individual cards. Again, you can find them on our ARPDC site. And what they're mainly for planning purposes, because if you print them off, then you can just spread them out on your table. Some of the consortium facilitators are using them, and they're going into schools to work with teachers or with staff, and they spread them all out, and they just kind of put them it's like word sort, vocabulary sort, and then deciding how they're going to plan their year. Now, having said that, many districts already have a pacing guide or a planning guide for the teachers. We do have one on the ARPDC site. I think most of you know that. Yeah, that's good. Good. Yeah. Oh, okay. Thanks, Isabel. I'm going to add this on. If you look in the chat, Isabel has said that other excellent resources to understand the math deeper is from Nelson. And these are the big ideas from Dr. Small. Yes, Isabel, excellent one. And actually at the end of this, I'll take this and put it into the slides so they have that as well. And I work with resources with Marion Small, and she's excellent. She's absolutely excellent. So you have these cards as well that you can use and help with your planning. Okay, and then the bridging document. I added this because teachers often ask, is there a bridging document? Unfortunately, the word bridging when it comes to grade 6 now with especially in fractions, there's no real bridge because you have to go all the way back. I guess the bridging would start from what the students are coming with prior to the grade 4 new learnings. So basically, in this document, you can get it on the website, and it is a good document, but really for fractions now, students are coming with equivalent fractions, which is going to be really good. So this will tell you what they will know from the previous program of studies, and equivalent fractions are really important, but that's now going to be done. The students will learn that in grade 4. And with they compare fractions with common denominators. Most of that is now going to grade 4. Anything with now it's addition is grade 5, and then we're looking of denominators, and then we're looking at addition and subtraction, and addition and subtraction in grade 5, but addition, subtraction, and multiplication in grade 6. And I might also say division when we look at one particular outcome. So that's the bridging document you can have there. What I've got for you, though, is you can have a look at it and see if it makes sense to you. Because the upcoming grade 6 students will not have worked with the grade 4 or 5, it will be important to look back and see what the necessary prior learnings are. And I mentioned that earlier, but so what I've done for you is something that's going to help so that you can see it at a glance. So important to understand that this is not everything in grade 4. What I did is just kind of make a diagram for you so you can quickly look and see this is what the grade 4s are learning this year. This is what and there's going to have to be some gaps filled from grade 3 as well. But all I did was try to focus on what's important and what will make a difference to you and what you may have to go back to. So grade 4s are going to learn about equivalent fractions and decimals. They've already learned that. Students, that's from the previous program studies. They've worked with fractions and decimals, tenths to hundredths. So your students should have an understanding of that, because that's going to help with, and up to thousands, because that's going to help with when we get to working with quotients and when we get to working with converting fractions to decimals. And then in grade 4, when they look at equivalent fractions, we're going to start really heavy with the models. And that's a lot of that paper folding, fraction strips, where not so much we don't want students, although it's great to have some commercial, fraction strip or fraction blocks or fraction tiles. But we really want students to experience that what's a half? And if I fold it again, then I have 2/4, which is the same as 1/2, and so on. And those slides, I've got those slides for you in the grade 4 package. So you'll see those. You might see them in the grade 5 as well, but that's critical. Number line, the grade 4s will be working on number line. Number line is right through, and it's very prevalent in the new program of studies. They're going to look at something called partitioning, and we're going to talk about it again today. And then they're going to get into common factors. So grade 4s now are going to have to simplify fractions. And simplify, or simpler form, what is the simplest form? That we had a whole discussion around that, and I spoke about it with grade 4. That's that vocabulary. Does simplify mean the lowest terms, or does it mean just a simpler term? Like, can it be maybe 4/8 going into something? I'm trying to think of a fraction where I'm not going to reduce it to 1/2 in particular, but I'm going to leave it at 4/8 instead. So 8/16, I can simplify that to 4/8. But do you want me to simplify that to 1/2 or 2/4? Like, you're going to have to be so conscious of that when you talk to the students. Then we've got common factors and greatest common factor in grade 4. And then they're going to look at percentages. Then we look at grade 5. They now will look at improper fractions and mixed numbers. Interesting to note is that in this new curriculum, they're not called proper fractions. They're just called fractions. There's even some research and some math educators I mentioned last week who actually who say we shouldn't call it even improper fractions anymore. They should all be called fractions. And this one, improper fractions, should be called fractions where the numerator is greater than the denominator. And because improper implies something negative or something wrong. And so, and I mean, it's not a blanket statement. It's just that some math educators are now saying that maybe we need to reconsider this. And then they're looking at adding up, subtracting fractions with like or common denominators. They call them a common denominator, which means it's the same or they're like. And again, we're going to talk about which one are you going to say. They're going to express, model, and compare, and then they're going to look at ratios, part to part, part to whole. And they're going to relate fractions, decimals, and ratios and percents. So you can see how that buildup is coming from grade 4. So now we're adding ratios into the mix, but the students are going to look at the commonality and how they relate to each other. And I kind of like that flow, because it's like order of operations. You start with one particular understanding, and then you build up. The unfortunate thing is that all of this would have been great if your students had come from a 4 and 5. And then we look at grade 6. And grade 6, we're looking at addition and subtraction of fractions, where we have to find the common denominator because they won't necessarily be there. So we're adding things like 1/2 and 2/3. So it's finding that common denominator, adding and subtracting fractions. And that includes improper fractions and mixed numbers as well. And then we look at fraction as a event. And this one we're going to talk about at the very end, because it's the one that probably for me, it's the one that I haven't quite got my head wrapped around, because I want to say if it's a fraction as a quotient, it means, and it does mean that I'm going to use division, or does it mean I use division when it's a remainder that's in a fraction form? So we'll talk about that when we get to that slide. That's probably the one that I have to really, really think about when I am going to teach that. And then we're going to look at multiplication of fractions, but we're looking at multiplying a fraction by a natural number, or multiplying a natural number by a fraction. So either one of those. And then proportions. And this is the one where I think I'm going to let this go for today, because there is so much. We're looking at everything we've learned from fractions, equivalency, percentage, finding common, I'll say common denominators, but looking at common relationships between a rate. We're looking at unit rates. What does that mean? And then calculating a percentage of a number. And that in itself, that will be a different session. So you can see each of the grades and what's important. I only did this very simply, but you notice that there's no statements there. I'm just kind of pulling out the main ideas. And then I put it together for you. So if you wanted to see how it looked together, going side by side made it too small. But now you have it on this slide so you can see. Again, remember, it's not everything, especially the verbs. But it does give you a sense of, if you're doing a combined grade, or if you're a math lead, or if you're going to work with some students, what's important, what they need to focus on. And then I'm just going to show you this next slide. This is, again, a note that you're going to get. So I'll just go to this. What I did here then is I tried to show it to you in a different way in a chart so you can see that progression. But I chose to start with grade 1. Fractions in this current program of studies do not start in grade 1. I think I want to say they start in grade 3, but I'm not sure. But students come to school knowing that what half an apple is, sharing half a cookie. They know some of the fractions already. They have an intuitive understanding of what half means, and then we bring in the symbolic, and the kids just kind of get lost with that, even though they understand half. So they do know, and they are going to learn in grade 1. We're going to go back to that because we know that these students coming into school do have a sense of that. They're going to learn that half is part of a set and part of a whole shape. And then we just move on through the grades. We start with grade 2, which is a unit fraction. And again, this is something new for our curriculum. It's not something I've heard a lot of teachers use before this. I am going to give you a slide on this because I think it's really important for you to understand that unit fraction and what it means. And then we look at, we're going to build up as fractions of a whole or a region, fractions as part of a set or a group, because that is the one that anything the students struggle with, because when you have something that's part of a set, it could be cats and dogs, it could be big shapes and little shapes, it could be color, it doesn't matter. The group is there, it's not equal pieces like a part of a region or a shape. And then we're looking at fractions on a number line, capacity, measurement. I've got some slides for you where you'll see different kinds of how we look at fractions in different ways. Then we move up, and grade 3s will start looking at all of those. And they're going to be there's going to start to compare fractions that have the same numerator and the same denominator, which is great. So when you have the same numerator, but you have 2 out of 7 versus 2 out of 10 or 2/4, they understand. Would you rather have 2 parts of a pizza, or you can do circles and show them visually, of course, or concrete? Would you rather have 2 out of 4, or would you rather have 2 out of 10? Or would you rather have 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 4? And that's really good. You need to talk to them about that when we have the same numerator and the same denominator, lots and lots of visuals. And then you ask them questions like, well, when is it better? When would you rather have 2/4 rather, or 2/10 rather than 2/4? And I have a math a number talk that I did with one of the grades here, where the student said to me, well, when is 1/4 better than 3/4? When is it more or advantage? It was a number talk, and the student actually said to me, well, when I have to eat liver, because they'd rather eat 1/4 of liver than have 3/4 of the meat that they were given. And then we work grade 4. Equivalent fractions, greatest common factor. Look, you can see now it's getting quite heavy, and greatest common factor percentages. And the other thing about grade 4 that's going to be important to grade 5 and 6 that we're going to look at is multiples. We're going to be looking at some of these outcomes even within the grade that the students will need to have prior knowledge with. And multiples as part of number, in an earlier outcome, students will have to have worked with multiples in order to work with the fractions that they're doing here. And then grade 5, we're looking at improper fractions and mixed numbers. You can see this, and then grade 6, and that's what we're going to. So just another way for you to look at this. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Audrey. The scope and sequence, the document for K-6 is very useful. The only reason that I do this, and that's a really good point that you bring up, sorry. And I know that you'll get the site for the document, because I'm going to show you learning progressions. This is what I call a curriculum progression. So this is the actual Alberta curriculum, the new curriculum, and the progression. The scope and sequence is actually a little bit more detailed than this one is. This is just for the sake for you to see this at a glance, and it deals with the curriculum. But what I'm going to show you very quickly next is the learning progressions. So this, now I'm going to go a little bit deeper, and this is for you, these slides. I'm going to go through them quickly and you're going to look at them yourself. So these are the learning progressions are kind of universal. They go actually deeper, and they're when you unpack some of those statements from the learning outcome and the cusps, so that you look at the progression of how students naturally learn particular skills, concepts, and understandings. And I have here where it says it's a good idea to walk through the learning progression to try and understand and internalize the order or the path of learning. And it's at a deeper level than you'll see with the outcomes in. So I'm just going to show you what they are, and you're going to be able to go through them at your leisure. So I've actually got 4 different learning progressions depending on the math resource that you're using, or if there is certain people prefer a certain researcher who has done learning progressions. And some of these learning progressions are much more detailed and in-depth than others. So the first one is the math learning progressions, and this was actually developed by Dr. Lynn McGarvey from the University of Alberta. And the learning progressions, the book says Pearson on it, and it says mathology, but really these learning progressions, it doesn't matter what resource you use, because it takes you through that sequence of knowledge and skills, as I've got there, that students are expected to learn as they progress. And this is where, when you're starting to look at gaps in the learning and you're not sure where the students are or what you should do next, this gives you that really good detailed flow. It increases the understanding of how students develop mathematical thinking, and then you can see how it's organized from the big ideas, the strands, all the way down to the indicators. So that's one learning progression, one resource, and this is what it looks like. Now I've just got slides for it, but I know that anybody probably did, if your district is using Mathology, you then would probably have these learning progressions, and they're good for you to go through to see it step by step. So this is fractions, looking at fractions all the way from partitioning to form, looking at quantities to form fractions, through partitioning all the way to addition. So this is very hard to see. You'll be able to read it when you get your slides. So it looks at going up. The reason I put 7 to 9 on here, this one just shows 4 to 6. You should go back to K to 3 for fractions as well, but this is 4 to 6. And then the reason I put 7 to 9 was because it's starting to look at multiplying a whole number or a natural number by a fraction and the reverse. So that's, and there's one, they go along for every single strand, and they follow the new program of studies, or the new curriculum, I should say, very nicely. Then we've got Dr. Marion Smalls from MathUp. Hers are as well. Hers are a little bit more visual. At the top, there's the essential understandings for fractions, and then you see the progression. So we're looking at fractions as part of a whole, of a set, and we just go from there, representing halves and fourths and so on. Fractions as numbers on a number line. So this is developing the understanding of fractions. Then we're getting into comparing fractions, and you can see kind of there's an example there. That's why it's a little more visual, how you can compare from using the common denominator to unlike denominators, and then it works from there using a common numerator and then a common denominator, sorry. And then we get into addition and subtraction. The parts in the blue boxes where I put the blue around it, that just shows you where we're looking at specifically in grade 6, where we're adding and subtracting fractions where one denominator is a multiple of another. Again, that's a progression when we're dealing with multiplying fractions. This one is adding and subtracting fractions, but we're going to it is with adding and subtraction fractions, not multiplying it. I take that back. So when we're looking at adding and subtracting fractions, when we want to find a denominator that's common to both, we can do it in various ways, and that's what we are going to see here. And then we've got multiplying fractions. Multiplying by in symbolically, where you see the whole number, and then looking at it through area, which is not something, again, the grade 6s would do it, where it shows 2/3 times 3/5. So that's another progression. And then you've got Graham Fletcher's. Lots of people like Graham Fletcher. His is not quite as detailed as Mathology, the numeracy progression, or Marion Smalls, but his is very neat to watch. It's a 7-minute video and it's very visual. He's kind of sitting at a table and he's drawing on big chart paper and he shows you the progression. So it's not quite as detailed, but it is interesting to watch and it's fast. You have to be very, very careful though, because he puts it by grade and his progressions that he calls them, and they're American, so they don't match with ours necessarily, but you get some sense of it. And there's lots of teachers who really like to watch them. I just want to say this to think about, what you need to think about just in general. And this is what Graham, in his videos, this is what he made me think about when I watched him. And he raises that awareness. So when do we introduce the symbols for fractions? And I mentioned that before. Oftentimes students come in, but we're already bringing that symbol of 1/2 and they really know intuitively, but then you show them the symbol and they're not sure. So he asks that question, should we introduce the symbol at 1/2 or 1/3 when we talk about unit fractions? Should we just show 1/2 and just say it rather than write it? He does, there in the, when you follow the curriculum, it does say when you have to introduce it symbolically, but he raises that awareness. And also with the vocabulary, do we say same numerators, like denominators, common denominators, proper fractions, improper fractions? The reason I bring that up, that one is mine, because when I do my teaching, with these junior highs, I'm finding that as I said, I am very aware now. So whether we say same numerator or like numerator, you can say both. Maybe you want to have an anchor chart if you have a math wall, and say both and talk about both, because sometimes I might say like one day and I might say, the same the other day, or I might say them both at the same time. It's just, you need to think about, what are you saying? Which words are you using? Are you being consistent? And both, I see different documents that say both of them. Just get this chat. Somebody is sending, okay. Thanks, Isabel. Isabel, you should be going. All of these that are in the chat, I'm going to, for all of you who are putting them, thank you so much. I'm going to put them in the slides. And the last one I'm going to show you, it's just a little bit more because it's got tasks to go with it. This was originally from EduGains, which was out of the Ontario Ministry. Now, when I went the last time to EduGains, it said that site was no longer there. And so I had to find it on another site called Teamwork. But this is written by Kathy Bruce. She's put this together. The only learning pathways on this site that I see are for fractions. Again, they follow the same order. You look at them, you'll say, oh yeah, this seems, it's following the same order. Maybe not as detailed again, but you have unit fractions, comparing fractions, and operation. And when you go on the site, if you click on any one of these squares, so I clicked on with unlike denominators, adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators, it sends you to a page where there is an explanation and there are activities. So this is just a little bit different. I could only find it for fractions on this site. There's many other activities, some good professional learning on the website, but I could only find the pathways for fractions. So when I clicked on add and subtract with unlike denominators, I came to this turf touchdown. And this is, I am giving you an activity to do because I really like this one. And you may have done this, well, you wouldn't have done it with sixes because they wouldn't have known what to do. They wouldn't have done adding in fractions. So in this activity, and there's more than one, I just put it on the next one, and I did it very simply. There's the turf touchdown, create a model to help you solve it, and it tells you about field engineers, and it gives you an idea of what you have to draw a rectangle, and then there's your fractions. 1/30 of the whole field is put down, so they're putting turf or grass. So for day 1, they put 1/30 of it. Day 2, they put 2/30 of it. So what are you going to have to do? How will you know what 1/30 is? And then they have examples where the students actually divide the field initially into 30s, into 30 pieces, and then they do 1/5. So we're looking at equivalent fractions as well. And then at the end, we're going to have to add, because it says here, after day 4, have the engineers covered half of the field or 1/2 of the field yet? So they're going to have to do some addition. They're going to have to, or if they have the visual, they're going to have to look at it. And then it's going to give them the rest of the days when they're going to have to do some adding. And so they're going to have to look at some common denominators. I thought it was a really great activity at the end. It's fun because the students are doing something visual. You could change it to something else if you wanted to, but that's an idea of an activity for one of those particular boxes. Notice that I corrected myself because with this half, and again, there's a vocabulary. I'm very conscious, as I said. So I know I catch myself even in this presentation saying half or one half. I do want to say one half. I would say one half in front to the students, but we're so used to saying half, and we're a quarter, a half, where I think really, if you can, try to say 1/4 because that's what it reads like, or say one half. But I notice I've been saying half. Some of the vocabulary, and I'm going to show you some again, some definitions, but I just put this together for you. So dealing with addition and subtraction, and this also deals with 6 and 8, which is the looking at proportions. This is just some of the vocabulary that you and the students are going to encounter when you deal with these fractions and ratios. And so then you want to think about I need to feel comfortable. We need to do we need to do anchor charts or have a math wall, or however you work with this understanding, and not just putting it on the wall, but using it, speaking it, having the students speak it, even having them write it if they have to, instead of saying, just putting what the factors of 2 and 8 are, or 8 and 16, having them write the factors of, so that they write, it becomes internalized for them as well. So all I'm going to show you were these are the slides you're going to get. So this is looking at prior learnings based on the curriculum. These are some of the slides from session 4 and 5, and they will be sent to you. I'm going to show you just as an example, but I have decided, since putting this together, that I'm going to send you all the grade 4 slides and all the grade 5s, as I said. I start right from what is a fraction. What do those two numbers mean? 1 is a quantity, 2 is a quantity. How are they related? It's not just what is a fraction, like this is 1/2. So I start with that. We're looking at what a unit fraction is. That's critical, what a unit fraction is. And those of you who heard me before in 4 and 5, you're going to hear this. This is 1/5. This is 2 1/5. This is 3 1/5. And say it to yourself. Have the students say it if you need to, because that's what it is. This is 1/4. This is 2 1/4. There's 3 1/4. There's 4 1/4, because that's what a unit fraction is. And then we're going to talk about the other thing, in case I forget, is every fraction has, every shape or area or visual has 2 fractions. Those that are shaded and those that are not shaded. And again, some of you have heard me say, in this particular green circle, 2/4 are shaded green and 2/4 are white. There are always 2 fractions for that whole, and there are always 2 fractions for that set. And you need to, so ask them what both fractions are. And if they say, you can say what part is shaded, and then what is the other fraction. So get used to things like that very quickly, so they know. And then here we have definitions. This comes from an American site, but I really like it because it's colorful. You can print them off. This is based on San Giovanni. But again, remember, the site is very, very detailed. It's like got every grade, and there's so many per grade, 72 pages, I think, in one grade. But you have to be careful because it is American, and so it won't match our grades. There is one document that has all of the vocabulary, and then it's kind of like a spreadsheet where it then tells you what grade you will find that particular definition in. And depending on the grade that you teach, sometimes the definition is a little bit different. It can be a little bit more sophisticated or a little simpler of the same vocabulary word. So I wrote, be familiar with all the interpretations and possible understandings around the vocabulary word. And that's things like 1/4, 1/4, 1/2, 1/2. You need to be able to understand that there's so many ways to say it. And when we get to grade 6 and we start talking about ratios and 1:2 and unit rates, that line has so many meanings to it. 1/3, 1 divided by third, and so on. Again, you have to be very familiar with that. Note when you say that, and make sure you note that with the students and they understand that as well. And again, equivalent fractions. So we're looking at the vocabulary that goes with it. There are a few misconceptions and misunderstandings that I have for you in some of these slides so that you can go through those. Some things to remember, and that's how we say it. This one is from Marion. Smaller fraction is part of a whole. To know what the fraction means, we need to know what the whole is. And that's really critical. Sounds simple, but we really need to know that. And there's an actual slide I have of you where instead of giving the whole and asking the fractions, you give the fraction 1/3, and now you say to the student, show me the whole. What would the whole look like? This is for you. This is just to remind you, you're going to see in some of my slides, I got a little lazy and I wrote them slanted. Not a good idea, I would say, based on my experience, the number, rather than having the numbers side by side, they should be underneath each other like a real fraction is. Sometimes we have a tendency, it's easy to write them slanted, or we might see them. I was looking for some practice activities to show you, and a lot of what I saw from sites, they were slanted. And so I avoided those because that, if you do it this way once and then you do it the regular way, it could just one student, two students, and you've lost them, or they might see this as 3, 1, 4. So it's a good idea to do it the proper way, and good for me to know as well. Comparing fractions with like denominators, looking at stacked number lines. I'm going through these quickly. You're going to get all of these slides. These are previous grade learnings. This is grade 4 and grade 5. One of the misconceptions that I found was that when students saw many sections on a number line, they just assumed that meant that the fraction was larger, no matter where it was. In this case, it was 8/10, and I actually, when I did this, I put the number lines side by side rather than stacking them, and the student thought, okay, well, there's 10 sections here. That must mean that 8/10 is greater than 4/5. So that's why the stacked number lines are really good. And you always want the unit at the end of the number line to be exactly the same. And I've got those in there. A little the Freyer model I use all the time with students. And again, it's just, you can use this with anything. And you can put anything you want there. Examples and non-examples are always a really good one to do, because then you can really see if the student you can check for that understanding, and you can change characteristics or facts, or you can put real life examples where you see them in context instead of that. But you can use the Freyer model for anything, and just change that vocabulary in the middle. Okay, so on addition and subtraction of fractions, I'm just going to go. This one is not difficult for the student, for you to get your head around, except it shows different examples that we're going to look at. So we're looking at the addition of subtraction of fractions can be facilitated by representing fractions with common denominators. And that's what we're looking at. Grade 6 is looking for those common denominators. The next 3 statements are variations of how we can determine that common denominator. So denominators are related if one is a multiple of the other, and you're going to see an example. Multiplication of one denominator by the factor that relates it to another denominator achieves common denominators. So we're going to look at examples how the denominator of one is a factor of the other one. And so we just find out what the other factor is, and that's what we're going to multiply by. And there is the product of the denominators of 2 fractions, provides a common denominator. So for lack of anything else, I remember when I used to teach it, always multiply the 2 denominators, and for sure that you're going to get, you'll get a common denominator. And so we say the understanding is fractions with common denominators have the same units, and that's that word common denominator. And of course, they have to know what a denominator is. And any numbers with the same unit can be compared, added, or subtracted. And that unit is that denominator. And that's where I wrote down here. The same unit means the number in the denominator is the same for each fraction. So what the students have to do is recognize 2 fractions with related denominators, determine the factor, because they're going to have to find a common one, determine the factor that relates one denominator to another, express two fractions with common denominators, add and subtract, and then, and solve problems involving them. Whoops. Just wait a second, I lost that one. Oh, the reason I only wanted to show you this one again was so that you can see that it relates to grade 6, what we're looking at for finding common denominators, and that grade 5, sorry, what's going on? And that grade 5s, sorry, grade 5s did work with common denominators already, so they have they've had that vocabulary word. So we're looking at a vocabulary, what's a like denominator or the same denominator? This is from the knowledge statement, facilitated, adding and subtracting is facilitated by representing the fractions with common denominators. So we have like denominators, which they should be able to do. Now we look at factors. The factors will help us find a common denominator, and so will multiples. And it doesn't say multiples in any of the it says it in one place, but they start multiples in grade 4, and I'm going to show you another method that's not necessarily mentioned there by looking at finding common denominators through multiples, and then we've got our common denominator here. So this is the next slide shows you that students in grade 4 will begin to know about multiplying the numerator and denominator to conserve or keep equivalence. So the students in grade 4, but they're not your students, but coming already, the students with the new curriculum will already come having some sense of multiplying the numerator and denominator because of equivalency. And it actually states it, and you'll see. So we're looking at equivalent fractions. This is grade 4. Equivalent fractions can be created by partitioning each equal part of a fraction in the same way. So here is a bar that's been divided into 3 equal pieces. So we've partitioned them, and we're going to take that bar and we're going to take each piece and partition it into 3 equal pieces. This is grade 4 that they're learning that, and they're learning that these are then equivalent fractions, that 1/3 is equal to 3/9. And it says in the knowledge statement in grade 4, partitioning a fraction can be interpreted as multiplying the numerator and denominator of a fraction by the same number. So there's already that prior knowledge that I'm multiplying this numerator and denominator by the same number, and that's what we've got here. So it's kind of like the prelude to finding the common denominator. And now grade 6, we're going to go to the knowledge statements. Denominators are related if one is a multiple of the other. So what we have here in this 3/5 and 4 and plus 4/15 is the denominators 5 and 15 are related because 15 is a multiple of 5. And so you don't really have to go any further when you see that it is a multiple of 5, and you're going to go then to the next knowledge statement and use that information, because we're going to look at what that other factor is. So I'll just go right to the example. 5 is a factor of 15 because 15 is a multiple of 5. The other factor is 3. Now, I'm just letting you know you're going to have to be slow with the students, because you're going to have to look at that. How do we get from 5 to 15? If 5 is a factor and 15 is the multiple, what's the other factor? You're going to have to use those words. So 5 times 3 equals 15. And I'm just saying here the reason to conserve equivalence, because we did that with grade 4. If you multiply the denominator by 3, you must multiply the numerator by 3. And you may have to go back and revisit equivalent fractions again, because that's what these are all about before we add. And then they're going to have to multiply both by 3. So 3/5 equals 9/15. You notice I didn't put the times 3 or the times 3 in this particular example. We want to have the same denominator before we add or subtract. And then the last one, where we're looking at the product of the denominators of 2 fractions. So you can go right to just saying, I'm not going to bother with factors, in particular when we don't have compatible numbers. I'm just going to go right to multiplying the the two denominators to get 75. And again, if I multiply 5 times 15 to get 75, I have to multiply 3 times 15 to preserve or conserve that equivalence. And then then we multiply it and we just keep going with that. So I think what I did for this one is I did the reverse. Oh, I had to do both of these. So 3/15 is 45/75, sorry, and 4/15 is 20/75. And then we added the two together. Now, I'm just going to say to you, no, we're not going to talk about it today, but I'll just say 65/75 that you can simplify that. And I mean, we did it the way of multiplying the product, the two denominators as a product, but you have to be very careful. Do you want the process? Are you looking to follow this particular knowledge statement where you multiply the two denominators together? In that case, then 65/75 for you at that time, depending on where you are in the learning, you may decide that that's good enough and then work to simplification. But knowing that, they've done this in grade 4. Avoid writing with a slanted line. I've already told you that. I always find this, remind myself. This other method, this is one we're familiar with, but I don't think I saw this statement in the program of studies. In the curriculum, I don't believe that. I mean, it could be part of one, but finding a common multiple of the denominators. So I'll just show it to you, and maybe it is part of one of the statements. So when we look at 3/10 plus 1/6, so looking at multiples, so the multiples of 10 are 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Multiples are in part of grade 4, so you'll have to do some catching up. They may have had them in grade 5 in the previous program of studies. And the multiples of 6 are 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, and 36. And so I'm looking at both of them share the multiple of 30. 30 is a common multiple of the denominators 10 and 6, so 30 is the common denominator in this case. They could have done 10 times 6 and is equal to 60 to find the common denominator, which is one of the statements. I didn't really see this or get it. I didn't think it was inferred by one of the statements, but this is one that is another strategy that you or the students could use. So here, then I did this just to show you how you can do the common 3 times 3, whatever you do to the denominator, you do to the numerator. And I was almost going to say whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. And, that's okay once they get, you get into it, but bottom is really I should be saying denominator and numerator, and then so on. Okay. And then you add the two together. So, and I just put that in words, 9/30 plus 5/30 equals 14/30. Just, I know it is a mouthful, but you do want to verbalize that as much as you can. I'm going to show you something that I think is really important, and it's actually experienced from my teaching years ago, to think about the visual look used to multiply the numerator and denominator, and you'll see what I mean by visual look. It's when you write it or when students write it. Okay, so I see it like this. So when you see this multiplication, this is just I'm just talking about what it looks like when you multiply. So do we put 3 over 3 and do 3 times 3 with the equals 9 and 10 times 3, but put that 3 over 3 like a fraction? Or do you just do, and I had to do this quickly, do you just do times 3 times 3? And I've even seen it where they only do 1 times 3, which is not, I would not do that with a student. The only reason I am saying this to you, or look at this one at the top here where I did this, that's the other one, where you put one long line for 3 times 3 and 10 times 3. There's no right way, but it's just which way do you think would make most sense to students? This long line across here that I did, maybe that's too confusing. It looks like one big fraction for some of the students. But again, note what you do, kind of be conscious of it and how you show it to students. And I'm not saying there's any one right way. Okay. And then this is just practice. Now, so I just thought, I'll take a practice sheet. I've got the site for you to use, and then away you go with it. And I thought, well, you know what? There's other things I can do with this fraction sheet. So I have some
Before you
suggestions.
do that, Sorry, I have a question. Can you go back to the previous slide,
Yeah.
please? When they're in the bottom left-hand corner, where you've got the 3 times 3 and then the 10 times 3, when they look at the 3 over 3, and I know that's not the right vocabulary, but anyway, the 3 over 3, would they interpret that as like 3/3 equals 1?
Oh, very good, Audrey. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
That's
how
what I'm
confusing
saying.
is that for them?
Pardon me?
How confusing would that be for them?
I think it would be confusing. But I wanted you, this is to show you to be aware of what you do and what I've seen. So, yeah, this one on the right, that's me. That's more more of my tendency to do that.
And I would do that too, rather than having it look like a fraction like the one on the left.
Right. Who drew
Okay,
that in the
thanks.
circle? That was excellent. Thank you. That was yeah, but it's just, and I guess the whole thing is that all of these little things, you just have to be so aware of them, and it's not after a while it becomes second nature. But that would fool me. That to me is 1. That would be 1 over 1. That would mean 3/10. So absolutely. I think this one here, I did this for another reason on an example in another grade. It just looks like one big fraction to me. So yeah, you're right, Audrey. Absolutely. Okay, so here's these suggestions. I don't know how, oh, Isabel, she did the circle. Thank you. So the suggestion, the first thing that I want to do before we even look at the suggestions for how to do this practice sheet is be careful of numbering questions. I noticed that right away. I'm very aware of that. Like that question number 1 with the period, I'm not so certain about that. That's too close to the fractions. In any kind of practice worksheet or practice sheet that you do with students, no matter whether it's fractions or whole numbers, I'm a little bit leery of that numbering. And so whether you use letters or whether you put a bracket or a parentheses, beside the number, it needs to be separated because I'm a slow learner, and I looked at that and I thought, oh my goodness, there's too many numbers here. So that's one thing. Okay, so here's the practice sheet. I might say, start with determining the common denominator for each of these. That's I don't want the answer. All I might want to do is start with finding or determining what the common denominator is. Now, look for like denominators. And so that's too many questions on here, 12, and it's quite small, but I would say only look for the common. Where do you see like denominators already? Like in number 6, 9/12 plus 2/12. Then I would say, that's a common denominator. Let's do that one. Look for denominators only where you multiply the denominators. So let's look where we can multiply the denominators because it's really easy. Like number 4, I can multiply 6 times 11. That's easy, 66. Number 3, I can multiply 7 times 10. That's easy, that's 70. So again, looking at those knowledge statements and using them within these questions, looking for the denominator that is a multiple of the other denominator, like in number 9, that's where 5 is a multiple of 10. I could use multiplication for that one too, numbers 8 and 12 and so on, and then finding common multiples of the denominator, like number 1. So the common multiples, if you might leave that one out because it's not one of the statements, but the multiples are 2, 4, 6, 3, 6. 6 is a common multiple, but again, 2 times 3 is an easier way. But have that discussion if you can. Think about that. Which one would I do? Which one do I think some of my students might be able to handle a little easier? And then I've got these note in these practice questions, and note in the ones that the samples I gave you. The fraction with the lesser denominator is not always the first one, but like look at question number 12. 2/12, the denominator 12 is greater than the denominator 4. You can see in many questions, or we have a tendency, I do, to put the smaller or the lesser denominator first. 1/6 plus 6/11. You can see number 1, number 3, but that's something that you should note, because that might throw students off. If you keep doing the lesser denominator first, it might throw them off when they see 2/12 and 2/4 or 2/4. The answer may be an improper fraction. And that you have to talk about that. That may throw them off. And some of them, these questions, they are. And if it can be where the numerator is greater than the denominator. But again, or do you want it left as an improper fraction, or do you want them to put in mixed number? Just think about those, because again, your students haven't got that. But if you do mixed numbers and improper fractions first, what's that follow through? What's your main focus or your learning goal for the lesson? And do you want to add those other things in, like simplifying it? And how do you want to see the final answer? As an improper fraction, which I just talked about, a mixed number, or in simplest form? And that you may want to just put that aside for that day. Just figure out, you can use these questions probably over one or two lessons at least. Focusing in what the learning goal, what's my learning goal, is to find that common denominator through those methods. And I gave you the site for that. It's 5 o'clock, so I'm going to stop. We didn't get to multiplication, but you can see what I did for these slides, because I know that I go too quickly. I provide the examples have provided you what the meaning is of these statements right within the statement itself. So you can have a look at it that way. And then you can go through the slides. You'll see the whole one here. I'm showing you visually what a fraction, multiplying a fraction by a whole number or a natural number looks like, what that means. And then I add the symbolic, and then I've got another one for you here. So you can go through that. And I always try to put the statement, this is a knowledge and understanding statement, that go with this particular visual that I'm showing you. And again, I've gone through again, then relating fractions to quotients. This is a little bit of a tough one, but I've given you examples here so that you can see it. Go through this because it is division. And again, you're going to have to go to prior learnings, because grade 6s have already learned how to divide a whole number into a decimal with a standard algorithm. And that's going to really be handy here, because we're looking at division. And then I've given you an example here, a visual, so that you can see what it looks like, and then the symbolic that goes with it. And something for you to think about. I think that's, 2 minutes. I just want to show you this one. Some of you have seen this. This is just going to take 2 minutes. This is such a cool video. It's very short. And if you have to go, that's fine. I'm just going to unshare. Did I unshare? I want to share this here. I hope this is the right. Oh, no, that's the slide. Sorry. Okay. And I'm going to share again. And I'm going to share the video. Here it is. Now, I said to the group, Maria, she's still here. If you're still here, you've seen this already. And I think Sandra has as well. So this is actually supposedly true. This happened. I'll let you watch it, and then we'll see. You'll see. Hope you can hear it.
In the 1980s, A&W launched an advertising campaign to promote a new third-pound burger. It was bigger and beefier than the competition's puny quarter-pound option, and the price was the same. So how come nobody bought it? Turns out, Americans are just terrible at math, like really bad. Everybody thought that 1/3 was smaller than 1/4 because, 4 is bigger than 3. The whole thing went down in history as a huge marketing fail. And we've spent the last 40 years crunching the numbers. Our best mathematicians working day in and day out, trying to crack the uncrackable code, solving the insolvable equation to claw our way back from this embarrassing episode. And we've done it. Introducing the A&W 3 Nights Burger. It's bigger. Genius.
Okay, I'll just stop sharing this, and I'll just share the last screen here. Whoops.
Double bacon. Double cheese.
Let me just,
Friday.
there we go. Okay. I'm just gonna share this once more. I just want to share the last screen only because I hope this is the right one. Yeah, should be. Yeah. Just gonna go down here. It's doing this for me. Okay. It's now, look, it's going too slow for me. I don't know what's happened here. I don't know what's, oh, there it is. Go a little further. These are all the grade 4 and 5 slides that I wanted. I was going to put in your slides, but I've decided to do the grades separately. So there is, this was the thank you, but I just wanted, the reason is because check for a second session on fractions on October 25th of this year. And then watch for that session posting on the proportions, the rates, the ratios for 4 to 6. So we're going to look at percentages, ratios. I'm going to redo those. Okay, which is the 6 and 9 for grade 6, but I'll include the grade 4 and 5 as well. Now I'm going to stop because now I've gone to, yeah, Maria, it is funny. And apparently that A&W problem is supposedly, it really happened. So I'll stop my sharing. And thank you, all of you, for coming. That was so nice of kind of you to stay. I'll just I'll share my screen here. So thanks so much. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you all for coming. I'll stay on a little bit if you have any questions. And remember that you're going to get, I will send you. Oh, Isabel, you stayed. That's very nice, kind of you. Sandra, thank you, and Maria. And of course, I know I'll be seeing those two again for sure. They've become like my assistants here. So yeah, thank you so much and have a really great evening. I'm just going to stop the recording, Isabel.
Thank you, Betty.
Here.